Welcome back to the Morning Brew here on CNC3. Let's get right to it. I have Prime Minister Gaston Browne, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, and he's also the current chair of CARICOM. Good morning, Prime Minister Browne, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Morning Brew. It's really a pleasure to have you on the program.
Yeah, certainly a pleasure. Good morning to you. Good morning to your viewing and listening audiences.
And I wanted to start with, how's Antigua doing? Because of course we're speaking to you via Zoom, so we have you have the pleasure of being in your beautiful island that I've visited once for work, and have plans to return, because I do think I need to investigate as many of those beaches as possible.
Absolutely, and you have an invitation from me now to bring your family, come on vacation here in Antigua. Or in Barbuda. You know, we're a twin island state just like Trinidad and Tobago. So you get two islands for the cost of one. And I'm sure that it would be a most delightful vacation.
Oh yeah, I was in Antigua for work. In fact, I was covering your re-election, and just being there was so amazing. And of course, when you cover elections, you get to travel the country. I wanted to talk, of course, start our conversation with Haiti. And let me toss to your start, because you had your first meeting, chaired your first meeting with CARICOM 2 days before the assassination of Haiti's President Jovenel Moise. And this is what you said then.
Colleagues, it is with alarm and grave concern that I have seen reports emanating from our member state, Haiti. I am aware that we have made many overtures to provide good offices to help to resolve the seemingly intractable political issues that have plagued the country. More recently, the horrific level of violence has caused significant loss of life and has made thousands flee their homes for safety. This is an untenable situation in one of our member states, and we must redouble our efforts to bring a resolution that allows some level of normality to return to Haiti.
Now, you said this to the CARICOM heads 2 days, Monday, and then by Wednesday, President Moise was assassinated. Was he attending that meeting?
No, he had indicated to us prior that he was busy last Tuesday making arrangements to appoint a new prime minister. In fact, the statement was made the night before his assassination, May hours. That statement was made Tuesday night at about 9 p.m. So it would have been perhaps about 4 hours later after the late President Moise was actually assassinated.
And what was that news like for you? Our own Prime Minister spoke on Saturday at our typical press conferences that he holds since the COVID-19 crisis has. He spoke of the shock of having to hear of one of your CARICOM colleagues, someone that you know you've worked with throughout the years, being assassinated. But of course, you were addressing the worsening situation in Haiti at the time. So I just wanted to find out from you, what was it like for you hearing about his assassination, and what are some of the major concerns that CARICOM has with Haiti that has been exacerbated by this latest development?
Right, so we were all shocked. I mean, no one expected that the level of violence in Haiti would have risen to the extent that the president would have fallen prey to the violence and would have been assassinated. So, we were all shocked and obviously saddened by that particular development, because within CARICOM, we have a culture of resolving our differences through diplomacy, dialogue, and even peaceful protestations. And where those fail, then, we utilize the governance institutions to resolve our differences. So no one really expected, the level of violence to have risen to that level. Now, we had expressed concerns about the violence on the ground, in which many individuals, many Haitians would have lost their lives. And, that was of serious concern for CARICOM. So in our communique, we would have condemned the level of violence that was taking place in Haiti, and would have offered our good offices to assist with negotiations between the warring parties, the political factions, with the hope of restoring some level of stability within Haiti. But unfortunately, President Moise was assassinated. Now, the constitutional and political crisis obviously existed prior to his assassination. What we're very concerned about now is that even though there's a relative, let's say, period of peace at this time, as you know, they have a state of emergency and so on, but we're very concerned that the violence may erupt very soon. And if that is the case, it could be potentially explosive because there's currently a power vacuum, a leadership vacuum within Haiti. As you know, Claude Joseph would have declared himself as the acting prime minister. But there's another person claiming legitimacy to that office, and that is Dr. Henry, who was appointed by the late president just literally hours before he was assassinated. That situation is of serious concern, and you know too that the different stakeholders would have come together and agreed in a memorandum of understanding to the appointment of a third party to serve as the interim president. That's Joseph Lambert, who is head of the Senate in Haiti. So we suspect that there could be further instability if Haiti is not allowed, and given the kind of support by CARICOM and other external actors to come up with a homegrown solution and indigenous solution to the political problems there. But as you know, Haiti's problems go well beyond politics. I mean, there have been long-standing issues, socioeconomic issues, and more recently, the issue of COVID, in which they do not have access to vaccines at this time, and COVID is rising exponentially within the country. So it is a very dire situation that requires the urgent cooperation of the community. And we have the view that CARICOM has the legitimacy to assist as an honest broker in assisting the Haitian people to come up with a homegrown solution to their problems. We do not believe that any form of military intervention will help to resolve the issue. We think that ultimately what is required is assistance to help Haiti to strengthen its governance institutions, and at the same time to access resources to deal with the other problems, the other socioeconomic problems include addressing the existential threat that COVID presents to the entire Haitian population.
Yeah, we had actually Haiti's ambassador to the OAS, Boshi Edmond, on the program yesterday, and he was saying it's really important that Haitians come together and unite and lead their healing. I wanted to toss to that a little bit of that conversation for you.
I believe there are voices and other sectors of the society, all stakeholders, they will continue to work together and see how we can move forward together as Haitians, and after international can come and help us. But first, Haitians have to make the first step.
Now, of course, you were talking about CARICOM. Of course, in your initial address to the CARICOM heads, you spoke of in your meeting with the CARICOM's heads following the assassination of President Moise, you said that CARICOM would like to lead the process. And you're still saying that, but of course, CARICOM is leading in helping Haiti help itself. What form does that actually take? What does that actually mean for CARICOM?
Well, to serve as an interlocutor, I mean, we're not trying to impose a CARICOM solution on Haiti. I made it clear before that it has to be an indigenous solution, one that will have buy-in from the Haitian population, the political actors, the broader civil society, so that there could be a sustaining solution. What we do believe is that CARICOM could play a role to bring the different actors together in order to ensure that they hammer out a sustaining agreement that could ultimately result in the strengthening of their institutions, because you have to take into consideration that the governance institutions within Haiti are extremely weak. Even the whole issue of presiding over free, fair, and credible elections. I mean, the institutions within Haiti at this time would not create the type of confidence for the Haitian people to believe that free, fair, and credible elections could be held. So this is where CARICOM could certainly assist in helping the Haitian people by providing some level of technical assistance along with the international community so that they can strengthen their governance institutions and to have some interim government, perhaps maybe a broad-based government in the region, in the interim, until such time as they're able to hold credible elections.
Prime Minister Browne, do you think CARICOM has done enough to support Haiti throughout the years? Is that what you were thinking when you made your opening address to the heads?
CARICOM has assisted in terms of, encouraging the various Haitian administrations to maintain peace and stability within Haiti. Obviously, CARICOM is not a wealthy region, so in terms of giving, grant aid, I mean, that's not one of the options that could have, been considered. But in terms of standing in solidarity with Haiti as a member state of CARICOM, clearly CARICOM would have stood with Haiti over the years, and there are many actors over the decades that would have assisted in resolving some of the political and social problems within Haiti. I recall most recently, back in 2016, our own ambassador to the OAS, Sir Ron Saunders, would have assisted in resolving an issue after Mateli had demitted office and elections were protracted. They were able to install an interim government. And thereafter, Moise was actually installed as president. So CARICOM, through various actors, your own His Excellency Mr. Dimas, former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, many Caribbean actors would have assisted Haiti, acting as interlocutors to address their, social the social issues.
I know over the weekend, since you mentioned Sir Ron Saunders, he got into a war of words with Haiti's Ambassador Boshi Edmond. What's the status of the relationship between Antigua and Barbuda and Haiti at the moment?
We have good relations. What was happening prior to the president's assassination is that they did not want CARICOM countries to speak frankly about the situation in Haiti. They wanted us to just turn a blind eye. And Antigua and Barbuda, through its ambassador to the OAS, literally called a spade and expressed serious concerns about the escalating violence within Haiti. And perhaps if they had a different outlook in terms of, the concerns that were raised by Antigua and Barbuda, that the situation could have been much different, because here's a situation now in which the president himself literally fell prey to the violence. In fact, I had a Zoom meeting with President Moise a couple of months ago, in which he was expressing concerns about our ambassador at the OAS in particular, bringing to the attention of the Haitian government the need for a sustainable solution or resolution of the political crisis in Haiti in order to avoid any further escalation in crime and violence within Haiti. And I took the opportunity to reassure him that, our position was not one of intervention in the domestic affairs of Haiti, but that we were expressing serious concerns about, our brothers and sisters in Haiti, especially on the ground, the Haitian people who obviously were susceptible to violence, even those with disabilities, were not spared from the violence. So it was concern about the situation in Haiti and the the fact that the people there were literally losing their lives because of the escalated level of crime and violence.
Yes, the high levels of impunity in Haiti was, of course, very worrying. We have to talk about air travel. You spoke of CARICOM countries having these prohibitive restrictions on their CARICOM neighbors, perhaps Trinidad and Tobago with higher COVID figures, but not imposing those same restrictions from countries outside the region with similarly high, if not worse, COVID figures. And of course, there's the point of you addressing the issue of high airport taxes from regional airports, which contributes to very, very high plane fares. Why is that so important? You did say that air travel is the oxygen by which regional regional tourism uses to function. How important, what is it you're hoping that your CARICOM neighbors will understand about air travel?
Well, as you indicated, it is the oxygen for regional tourism, and interregional travel is the sine qua non, let's say an essential condition for the effective functioning of the integration movement. If we can't move goods and people efficiently, then evidently the integration movement will fail. So we have the view that all of the restrictive elements should be addressed. The movement of people, obviously, by the discriminatory, let's say, exclusion of other CARICOM countries from travel to certain countries. We think that was just self-defeating.
On that point, Prime Minister Browne, do you think the region does not have enough faith in intra-regional tourism?
I don't think they understand the importance of it. It's $1 billion industry. I don't think they understand the importance of it. I mean, we look almost exclusively to foreign trade, tourists coming from abroad, but there is a significant amount of interregional citizens and residents, who are contributing to a vibrant interregional travel industry. And that in itself helps to support our tourism sector. It also helps to keep our airlines viable. I mean, as you know, LIAT has been in significant problems for the last year. And we know too that CAL is also experiencing financial problems. And that is because, there's hardly any opportunity to move people at this point because of the travel restrictions. And I made the point too that, our countries are taking on greater risk by accepting individuals, extra-regional tourists who obviously, coming from areas of higher risk. So, I'm not sure that there is any real benefit in introducing these travel restrictions within the region. But one of the areas of concern too, as you indicated, is the high cost of travel. And the high cost of travel would have reduced the demand for interregional travel. So as a consequence, Antigua and Barbuda would have proposed the reduction in travel taxes in order to increase the demand for travel and obviously to ensure that we can have a more vibrant interregional tourism product or sector. And at the same time, allowing for our airlines to recover. So these are issues that were raised at the level of the conference. And I would say that there was a general consensus that there should be a reduction in interregional travel in order to increase demand. There will be a further meeting, possibly within the next week or so, as we look at the figures and try and make a determination as to where the cuts should be, what level of cuts should take place. Antigua and Barbuda has gone ahead and provided some leadership on this issue. So we have agreed to reduce our travel taxes by 50% for the next 6 months. And we think now is a great opportunity too, because, low demand, hardly any interregional travel taking place. So there's really no revenue to lose at this point, or very little revenue to lose at this point.
Is it too safe of a period for you all to apply that test though, in terms of cutting your import taxes?
I would say it's relatively safe from the standpoint of the current revenue conditions. I mean, there's not much to lose. But in terms
that's what I was asking though. Is it too safe of a period? Is it going to give you a true reflection?
Well, I was coming to that. So,
okay.
I was making a point in terms as you indicated, whether or not it's a true reflection of the between price and demand, or pricing and demand, or the elasticity of pricing. It may not necessarily give a true reflection, but I'm quite sure that we could see some indication. And I think what is important at this point is to take that first step, and we can always review, what is happening within the sector on a regular basis and to adjust accordingly.
Now, of course, when you came in as the new chair of CARICOM, there was a storm ravaging the region, right? And I do remember when the damage that Hurricane Maria imposed on Barbuda. The island was absolutely decimated, and I'm sure that you all are still trying to recover from that damaging event. And at that year, at the UN General Assembly meeting, you were very strong in saying the Caribbean is dealing with a climate crisis that it did not create and is being left to pick up the pieces. Every year we are seeing our hurricane season get stronger and longer, and every year we have to clean up. You had to deal with meeting with neighbors and getting a report from Barbuda, San Grenada, and St. Lucia about what Tropical Storm / Hurricane Elsa did to them. I wanted to go back to your thought on calling for climate reparations at the recently held CARICOM meeting. So I wanted to play that.
Like the rest of the world, we are still battling to stem the economic and social tidal wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unlike the rest of the world, we are battling the pandemic at the beginning of an Atlantic hurricane season that has already seen 5 storms within the first month, and which is forecasted to be one of the busiest in recent years. The causes of the climate crisis have already been scientifically established, and the time has come for those countries irresponsible enough to continue their damaging emissions and practices to be held accountable.
Now, calling for reparations is very strong language. You did go on to say that we might have to explore our legal options. Coming from, I believe it was 2017 to now, and the strengthening of your tone, what do you think CARICOM's position or action will be in advancing this cause on the global stage?
Well, to date, I can't say that we have a consensus on the issue of climate reparations, but I believe it's a just cause as we all pursue climate justice. Evidently, it is the large emitters who have created this problem for us. They're the ones who are emitting these greenhouse gases, resulting in global warming and certainly more powerful and frequent storms. And there are other areas of let's say, climatic or climate decimation. I mean, we have had persistent droughts. We have issues with our coral reefs, ocean acidification, you name it. We have been suffering from a number of climate issues through no cause of our own. And we believe that those who actually cause these extreme climate events, that they have an obligation to pay. We should not have to depend on these profligate users of fossil fuels, making grant pledges, many of which they do not honor. We believe that there should be some obligatory mechanism that would force them to literally cover losses or cover damages as a result of these climate events. So you are right that Antigua and Barbuda would have upped the ante, and we are hoping that ultimately we'll get a CARICOM consensus on this issue.
Where do you think the resistance lies? Because
I wouldn't say that there's any resistance per se. It's just that the matter has not been fully ventilated as yet. So it will be, let's say, premature for me to say that there's a consensus. There have been preliminary discussions on the issue, but it has not really formed an official agenda item as yet for discussions.
Do you think, probably following on from how we treated with the decriminalization of marijuana at the CARICOM level, and also the whole issue of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade, that perhaps a commission a CARICOM commission might be warranted to explore the damage and present to the CARICOM heads definitive information on how the climate crisis has affected us and what our options are?
Well, without getting into any details at this time, I will say yes, but the thinking is that we should go even further. But again, it will be premature for me to share, any details at this time. Perhaps you can have a follow-up conversation in the coming weeks and months as we up the ante on this issue in seek of climate justice.
Prime Minister Browne, if you look, prod just a little bit, when you say up the ante, you did make mention of possible legal exploration. Is that what you're alluding to?
Precisely.
Okay, that's we definitely will reach out to you on that, because that's a very interesting development, and the legal exploration has worked in the transatlantic reparations argument, especially for Nigeria against the United Kingdom. I wanted to switch tack to what we are dealing with in the Caribbean, and that is the issue of the COVID-19 crisis, the fact that we don't have the amount of vaccines that we ought to. And you brought up the issue of vaccine hesitancy. I wanted to toss to this clip from our own Prime Minister a few weeks ago, talking about what was filling his plate when he was the chair of CARICOM from January to June.
As I leave the CARICOM chair on Monday I hand over to the Prime Minister of Antigua, who will take chairmanship of CARICOM. I can report that between January and last Wednesday, virtually all of my chairman's effort in CARICOM was on vaccines for the nations of CARICOM.
Now, really, you have a heavy load on your plate as the current chair of CARICOM. You've had to deal with this quickly de-escalating situation in Haiti. You have to you are taking over as chair in the middle of the hurricane season, which has already started hot and heavy. And of course, there's the continuing COVID-19 crisis and the troublesome matter of acquiring vaccines, because vaccine distribution has not been fair. And even if we were to get vaccines, there is initial data suggesting that too many in the region are vaccine hesitant. How do you plan to tackle that troublesome matter of vaccine hesitancy?
Well, through public awareness and public education. I think too that a number of our citizens and residents are taking the position that it is exclusively their personal right to determine whether or not they take a vaccine. I don't think they recognize that COVID is a common problem for all of us, and that it requires a common solution, and that we all have our role to play in defeating COVID and to return to normalcy. Now, the only way to resolve this COVID situation and to return to normalcy without having a significant amount of hospitalizations and deaths is through herd immunity by vaccination. The vaccines have proven to be very safe and efficacious. Over 3 billion people globally have been vaccinated. And there's no doubt that as a result of the vaccinations that COVID is now under retreat. So we know that the vaccines work, and there's no evidence that anyone would have gotten seriously ill or would have died as a result of taking any vaccine. So the evidence is there, and I can understand the initial hesitancy because of how quickly the vaccines were developed. But at the end of the day, this is the nature of science today, in which scientists have greater capacity and they're able to provide quicker solutions. Although the new mRNA vaccines that they've developed, I mean, those would have been literally ongoing research for at least a couple of decades. So it's not exactly new. And the AstraZeneca and the Sputnik and so on, those are utilizing old technology that existed for over 100 years. So, I think that we have to advise our populations about the type of economic wounds that could be extended or that could result from a protracted COVID situation. Our country is already very small and vulnerable. And if we're unable to return to normalcy, the economic wounds are such that we could have significant socioeconomic displacement, maybe spanning a decade. So it's in our interest to move collectively to get the herd immunity, to get at least 70 to 80% of our population inoculated, so that we can restore some level of normalcy. I mean, people have lost their jobs as a result of COVID. Many countries are struggling to pay public sector workers their salaries and wages. Pensioners, in some instances, are paid late. So it is really in the interest of all. I mean, we all have skin in the game. It is in the interest of every single resident, every citizen in each country to get vaccinated in order to protect the national interests. I mean, there are many of these individuals who are hesitant about taking the vaccines, who argue that they love their countries, they promote themselves as loyalists to their country and so on. I mean, this is their time to show commitment to their country and to get vaccinated. We do accept that there are some individuals for medical purposes, based on certain pre-existing medical conditions, that they may not be able to take the vaccine. And that's understood. And it's not necessary to have them vaccinated and to risk, in any life-threatening situation. But the rest of us, we're in the greater majority, maybe 95, 98% of us, we have an obligation to get vaccinated and not to see this issue exclusively as a personal constitutional right, but to understand that, by getting vaccinated, you're not only protecting yourself from possible hospitalization and death, and to protect your loved ones and others from contracting the disease, but you're also helping your country to recover. And this is a very serious issue. I mean, it is perhaps the most significant threat facing the entire Caribbean at this region. The irony about it is that in the wealthy countries, I mean, their citizens are far more, far more proactive in getting these vaccines. I do accept that they do have a cadre of anti-vaxxers, but unfortunately, the majority of our people seems to be following the minority anti-vaxxers in the developed countries. So I just hope that with greater public education awareness, and perhaps people like you and others in the media, Trinidad, Tobago, and throughout the Caribbean, including here in Antigua and Barbuda, that you can utilize your influence to encourage people to get vaccinated. And I also think too that even at the level of our homes, I mean, those who are vaccinated need to insist that other individuals in their homes, even in the workplace, that they get vaccinated. We're encouraging, employees to cooperate with employers, because, each employee deserves a safe workplace. And you have to recognize that if you're not vaccinated, that you represent an elevated level of risk. And, whereas, countries within CARICOM do not necessarily wish to introduce any mandatory vaccine requirements, we continue to urge our citizens and our residents to get vaccinated in their personal interests, in the interests of their loved ones and the wider society.
Prime Minister Browne, I wanted to talk about what next is on the agenda for CARICOM. And I think this is an important question, because I think a lot of us don't fully understand what the Caribbean community does. They know, they will issue a report, issue a statement, but they don't actually, they're not aware of the tangible work that CARICOM does. So what are some of the things that CARICOM ought to be doing and ought to be doing better? And what are some of the priority policies for you as your term of chairman continues?
Well, we certainly have to increase the public awareness and education about CARICOM, the single market and economy, so that our citizens and residents could understand the benefits of CARICOM. Heads would have taken a decision at the last conference here in Antigua to recommit themselves towards the full operationalization of the CSME. We even issued a declaration as well, in which we all agreed to do all in our power to ensure the full operationalization of the CSME. But already, the countries within CARICOM, they have been benefiting from functional cooperation. You know that, for example, we have the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice. We have many regional institutions that assisted us during COVID. We have UE that provided technical support, CAFA, the regional security system. So COVID would have really confirmed the need for us to have these institutions in which we could collaborate with each other and to, move in lockstep with each other. Evidently, there's some outstanding areas that countries at the national level would have failed to implement to allow for the full operationalization of the CSME. So, for example, we need to facilitate a more efficient movement of capital across the countries of the region, and generally to also increase trade within CARICOM, even in terms of produce and meats, to reduce our food bill, our food import bill. We think that if we get it right, and we have a common agricultural policy, and we're able to move goods between the countries, that one, our people could benefit from more nutritious produce and meats, and two, we would be able to displace the imported produce and meats, thereby resulting in foreign exchange earnings to the region. Obviously, there's some issues in terms of a reliable transportation to move goods within the region, which also has been addressed. In fact, that is one of the future initiatives that we intend to resolve, to probably have maybe a fast ferry, several fast ferries for that matter, that can operate within the region, or maybe a few hydrocraft that can move people to the region effectively. So that's an area that we have to resolve, because it's not just about having reliable air transportation. We must also have maritime transportation in order to move goods across the region.
Because we have so many islands in the Caribbean that can only really be accessed via ferry, and we can't solely depend on air travel. Prime Minister Browne, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Throughout our interview, we've been hearing another one of your family members crying and laughing. How has it been working from home?
Well, that's my little daughter, Peace. She's 9 months old and very active young lady. So sorry for all of the interruptions, but at that age, you cannot control. You cannot control them.
Please don't apologize. But I'm guessing it makes working from home very interesting, which I think a lot of our audience would enjoy.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Prime Minister Browne, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for having this wide-ranging conversation with us and being so thorough.
I should add here too that there are many areas that we are accelerating. If I can just list them quickly so people can understand, it's just not limited to the full operationalization of the CSME and to have efficient and effective transportation, but the issue of addressing NCDs, that's an area that we intend to also address jointly, to have maybe joint tourism promotion, having a single ICT space. In fact, we believe by about January of next year, we should see the elimination of roaming charges within the region. And obviously the whole issue of increased ownership, national ownership and regional ownership of major businesses, to include telecoms, banks, and so on. Those are issues that we have to address within the region. The EPA as well, to ensure that it is broadened to include possible funding for transportation, both A and C transportation, so we can get a combination of grants and concessional loans to offset the high costs associated with these initiatives. So I just wanted to list a few others so that your audience will have an idea of the areas of cooperation going into the future.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Browne, for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, we're going to take a very quick break for news and be back with more right after this.